Q Review Print Speaking to the Blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @symbol CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
The Herald Scotland on Wednesday the 26th of June 2024. From the news section. Greens demand probe of Trump's Scottish assets after New York fraud case. This article is written by Andrew Learmonth and read by me, Connie. There is an urgent need for an investigation into Donald Trump's business assets in Scotland in light of his civil fraud case in New York, the Scottish Greens have said. The party's co-leader, Patrick Harvie, has renewed calls for a so-called McMafia order to look into how the former president was able to buy golf resorts in Aberdeenshire and Ayrshire. The Scottish Government decided not to pursue an unexplained wealth order in 2021, with Hamza Yusuf, the then Justice Secretary, telling MSPs it would be an abuse of power for him to launch a probe into Mr. Trump's finances. In February, a judge ruled that Mr. Trump, his company and key executives deceived bankers and insurers by producing financial statements that hugely overestimated his fortune. He was ordered to pay $355 million, £279.9 million in penalties, with interest charges pushing the sum up further. Mr. Trump, who is the Republican Party's presumptive presidential nominee, is appealing the ruling. There have long been questions over how the tycoon purchased his golf clubs in Scotland. Unlike almost every other project Mr. Trump bankrolls, he did not take out large loans to finance the venture, instead spending more than $300 million in cash. In a letter to the First Minister and Lord Advocate, Mr. Harvie said that it was time to look again at the tycoon's Scottish property portfolio. Mr. Harvie said, "The verdict from New York and the litany of scandals surrounding Donald Trump underlines the urgent need to get to the bottom of the former president's finances and the business he runs. With every passing day, we're seeing even more serious questions about the honesty, integrity and basic trustworthiness of the former president. I urge Scottish ministers to look again at the request for an unexplained wealth order and to follow the money to see where it goes. The case for Scottish ministers to investigate Trump is now urgent and overwhelming. Scotland cannot be a country where anyone with money is able to buy whatever land and property they want without question." In his letter to the Scottish Government, Mr. Harvie noted, "We now have indisputable and independent evidence in the public domain that Trump's business dealings, including those in Scotland, were linked to fraud. Yet, while Trump is finally being held to account by the legal system in the US, Scotland's Civil Recovery Unit have provided the same comment that they provided in 2021, that they cannot confirm or deny whether a civil recovery investigation has been commenced." That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Andrew Learmonth and read by me, Corey.
A communication from the RNIB. Important safety warning. Recall of the wireless charging pad supplied with your RNIB Accord player. We write to make you aware of an issue with the wireless charging pad supplied with the RNIB Accord Player, product code DH472. The wireless charging pad may, in some instances, overheat and cause a fire. A picture of the product and the accompanying wireless charging pad is below. Image 1 shows the RNIB Accord Player, which is a black, cylinder-shaped speaker with a white on-off switch and ports for headphones, a USB stick and a charger. Image 2 shows the wireless charging pad supplied with the RNB Accord Player, which is disc-shaped with a clear outer red and black inner part which contain the words Fantasy Wireless Charger and Wireless Unlimitedness in the centre. At RNIB, the safety of our customers is of the utmost importance. As such, customers are requested to stop using the wireless charging pad immediately. You don't need to do anything for the time being. We will send you a replacement within the next 3 weeks. We will also send you a stamped addressed envelope so you can return the original charging pad. It is important that you return the charging pad, as this ensures that no one else can use it and put themselves at risk. If you have given the charging pad to someone else, please notify them of this notice. You can still enjoy your RNIB Accord Player by charging it using the USB-C port on the top of the device. We thank you for your cooperation and apologise for any inconvenience. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us on 01733 375 153 or kaorders at rnib.org.uk. That's KAORDERS @rnib.org.uk. Yours sincerely, RNIB Enterprises Limited, 154A Pentonville Road, London, N1 9JE, company number 887094, and that was a communication from the RNIB.
The Herald Scotland, on Wednesday the 26th of June 2024. From the news section. From the news section. Victims contacted by Scottish prisoners due to be released early. This article is written by Jodie Harrison and is being read by me, Corey. Victims of crime have been contacted by prisoners due to be released early under plans to tackle overcrowding in jails, it has been reported. More than 500 Scottish inmates are due to have their prison terms cut short beginning today, and be released in waves to ease pressure on the justice system. Prisoners inside for under 4 years who have 180 days or less left to serve are being released in waves over the coming weeks across all Scottish prisons. Sex offenders and domestic abusers are among those exempt, with governors handed a veto. The charity Victim Support Scotland told Sky News the system will lead to re-offending. Kate Wallace, its chief executive, said, "The last time this happened, over 40% had re-offended within 6 months. This created more victims, and we are fully expecting that to be the case again. Victims are concerned about the risks to their own personal safety and are aware already of some prisoners who've been in contact with victims saying they're going to be released, and it being used as a coercive control tool." The prison populace in Scotland is almost 8,300 more than exceeding the target operating capacity of 8,007. The Scottish Prison Service insists safety is a priority. A spokesman said, "Governors have vetoed anyone they found posed an immediate risk to individuals or groups, with the help of intelligence from police and social workers." Scottish Justice Secretary Angela Constance said, Immediate and urgent action is needed to deal with the significant recent rise in the prison population. In cases of emergency release, we have added 2 other ways to receive information. Victims can go through one of 4 named victim support organisations who can request information about a prisoner's release on their behalf. Alternatively, a victim can contact the Scottish Prison Service directly to request that information. That article was from the Herald Scotland. It was from the news section. It was written by Jodie Harrison, and it was read by me, Corey.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Wednesday, the 26th of June 2024, from the Voices section. The hush-hush lunch that led Sturgeon to say yes to a TV job. This article is by Alison Rowett. When Lucas McClish was found by a sniffer dog after 10 days lost in the California wilderness, he was in quite a state. Exhausted, hungry, caked in mud, he had survived on berries and rainwater. At one point, a mountain lion began tracking him. Finally, after a bad stumble, Mr. McClish curled up in a ball on the forest floor and prayed to the heavens for help. What a wimp, eh? He should have tried presenting election night coverage on TV. Then he would have had something to complain about. I'm glad to say Mr. McClish is now home and not planning any more adventures this side of Christmas. One hopes everything turns out just as dandy for another intrepid explorer about to venture into new parts. There are now just days to go before 2 very important events take place. One is the general election. The other is Nicola Sturgeon making her debut as a pundit on ITV1's election night show. I know, I thought it was a spoof too, but it is true. On July 4th, the former First Minister of Scotland will be joining George Osborne and Ed Balls in dispensing wit and wisdom on ITV1 from 9:50 p.m. ITV has issued publicity shots of Miss Sturgeon with Balls, Osborne and head honcho anchorman Tom Bradby. She looks every inch the polished broadcast professional, ready for the fray. Just in case she is having a last-minute wobble, Radio Times has helpfully asked a host of other teletypes for their tips on how to survive the long, stress-packed night. Before we get to those, I was intrigued to learn the story behind the Sturgeon signing. It was Bradby's doing, reveals the Radio Times. I thought after 2019, how do we take it to the next level, said the anchorman. Who do we put in there who people would be really interested in watching go from politician to analyst? I went up to Scotland and very carefully laid out over lunch how interesting it is to be an analyst and not have to stick to a party line. I think that's what appealed to her. She's up for new challenges. She was one of the preeminent figures of her generation, and she's looking for the next phase in her life. She is also someone who was arrested, questioned and released without charge pending further investigation as part of an ongoing Police Scotland inquiry into SNP finances. But hey, let's not get hung up on those details as we revisit the thrilling scene where Miss Sturgeon signed on the dotted line. I have questions. For a start, where did they have lunch? Knowing London media types like Bradby, probably not at a garden centre. I note there is no mention of a fee. Presumably Miss Sturgeon's people spoke to ITV's people about that later. Whatever the details, she's packing a bag for London and a shift in the ITV studio. So, to the advice promised earlier. Not that she needs it, of course. Miss Sturgeon has bobbed and weaved her way through tricky interviews more often than Tom Bradby has turned to the camera and raised a quizzical eyebrow at the latest outrage to cross his path. If anyone should know how to handle themselves in a hostile environment, it is a senior member of the SNP. I hear they taught the SAS everything they know. Or was that the Lib Dems? This time it will be different, though. This time Miss Sturgeon will have crossed the line from politician to pundit. She will be a civilian, and they do things differently on Punditry Street. First and last, she must trust no one, especially the two sitting next to her, Bradby as well. When she looks around the studio, there will be lots of smiling faces. It will be tempting to think everyone is on the same side, one big happy family. Don't believe it for a second. If she makes a mistake or shows weakness, no one is coming to her aid. Sorry to be blunt, but there we are. It's television, nothing personal. Punditry is a hard game. It is a buyer's market, teeming with names and faces hoping to be the next Ed and George, Alistair and Rory. And here is Scotland's former First Minister flying solo. Who is going to be her wingman, the goose or her maverick? Not Ed or George, that's for certain. She needs to watch out, too, for those other smiling assassins, the make-up ladies. They may come across as best friend material, but do not be fooled. Let the attention stray for a second, and they will be on you with the blue eyeshadow and too much blusher. Then it's a backcomb that will leave you looking like a woman possessed. Next, bananas and nuts. Not what you are agreeing to this gig in the first place, but some dietary suggestions from your fellow broadcasters. There is a hard night of snacking ahead. Not to get too personal, but Miss Sturgeon should also come up with a loo plan. Bradby is no liquids from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. Emily Maitlis won't touch Diet Coke till after the halfway point, just in case she gets 20 minutes free for a cat nap. Since this is Miss Sturgeon's first time as a pundit, I would steer clear of naps and power through. Do not be tempted to shut your eyes, even if it is just for a wee minute. No one looks good with dried drool on their face. The next piece of advice might be the most difficult to follow. It's what Bradby said about how liberating it is to say what you like. No more towing the party line come what may. That will seem weird. How far does Miss Sturgeon go down that road? That depends on what she plans to do after election night. Is she done with being a politician? Is the broadcasting game where the future lies? When she comes back up the road, maybe she'll let us know. Till then, best of Scottish for the big night. That article was by Alison Rowett.
This is from the Herald Scotland on Thursday the 27th of June from the news section. Tories accused of suppressing vote as voters wait on postal ballots. This article is written by Mark McDougall. Scots who registered for postal votes have been left waiting anxiously to see if they will receive their ballots ahead of the general election, with the Tory party being accused of suppressing Scottish turnout. Despite the deadline to register for postal votes being more than 2 weeks ago, on June the 11th, they are yet to be delivered. Many people who have contacted the authorities to request an update on them have been told that they should receive them on Friday, which coincides with the last day of the school year in Scotland for many students. A lot of families are then booked up to go on holiday the following day, and now face a race to be able to register their vote ahead of the July the 4th election. It could leave the Scottish turnout down, and Rishi Sunak has been criticised for the timing of the vote. The Conservative Party leader announced the election earlier this year, and many pointed out the fact that it was the start of the Scottish school holidays, but complaints went unnoticed. Now, with voters not receiving their postal ballot, the Alba Party has accused the Tories of disregarding the Scottish people, while Green Party MSP Gillian Mackay insisted they were actively trying to stop people voting. Local authorities use a specialist company to print and check ballots before they are sent out via Royal Mail, but Scottish parties insist the blame can't be put on them and lies solely at the feet of the Conservatives, with Glasgow City Council leader Susan Aitken tweeting her views it was down to the UK government and their date selection. She tweeted, "I absolutely sympathise with frustration, but it's not down to Glasgow City Council, who, along with many local authorities, use a specialist printer, who print and security check postal ballots and send to Royal Mail for delivery. UK government chose the election timings." Ms Mackay agreed with that and said, "When it comes to the timing of this election and all of the needless barriers that they have put up around voter ID, it's as if the Tories are actively trying to stop people voting and depress turnout. There was no need for the election to be right at the start of the school holidays. That's a choice that Rishi Sunak made. This is a really important election for Scotland, and it's crucial that as many people as possible have the opportunity to take part and make their voices heard." It was a view shared by Alba Party's General Secretary Chris McElhenney, and he added, "No blame can lie at the feet of election officers or Royal Mail. Rishi Sunak called an election that completely disregarded the people of Scotland. Many then rushed to register for a postal vote to ensure they could cast their ballot before going on holiday. Now people across Scotland may be denied a vote. This is nothing short of voter suppression by an out-of-time Tory party that will be out of office next week." Former Scottish Lib Dems leader Willie Rennie was also unhappy with the situation, and the MSP insisted it was unfair to expect people to stress over their vote at a time when they would be heading on holiday. He said, "The last thing people want as they pack their swimming costumes and hunt for sun cream is to chase up their postal vote and stress about returning it. The government should be making it as easy as possible for everyone to exercise their democratic rights. Instead, Scots are being left to scrabble." The SNP, Scottish Labour and the Scottish Conservatives have also been approached for comment. That article was written by Mark McDougall.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 27th of June, from the sports section. Celtic transfer latest as new number one priority amid Ida and Bernardo talks, by sports writer David Irvin. John Kennedy has insisted Celtic are working to sign a goalkeeper as a transfer priority, as he admitted conversations are happening over deals for Adam Ida and Paulo Bernardo. The Parkhead assistant manager revealed Celtic have identified possible targets to replace Joe Hart as number one after the goalkeeper retired at the end of the season. On Sky Sports, Kennedy said, "The club are working hard on that. Obviously, some targets have been identified and they've been working on that in the background. Again, it's a key position for us, and we know that that's a position we need to get in, and we want to do that as soon as we can, so hopefully in the coming weeks we can have some news on that. Pushed on having to travel to America in a pre-season potentially without a new number one in place," he added. "I think there are some challenges with that in terms of negotiations that will take place, but we know it's a key position for us, and we want to get the key positions in as quickly as we can so that we can get to work with them. The manager, the board and the guys at the club are working hard on that. Quizzed on making moves for Ida and Bernardo this summer after the pair spent last season on loan in Glasgow, Kennedy explained, "Again, I think there are a lot of conversations happening. It's a time when a lot of players have been on holiday and different things have been happening. A lot of conversations are taking place, and as we now come back for pre-season, hopefully in the coming weeks, a few things will start to happen, but there are a lot of plates spinning, a lot of work getting done, and hopefully we'll start to see all that start to materialise in the coming weeks." And that report was by David Irvin. From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 27th of June, from the sports section. Rangers poised to land 5th transfer signing as medical complete. Article by sports writer David Irvin. Rangers are poised to complete their 5th signing of the summer transfer window as Liam Kelly closes in on a return to Ibrox. The Motherwell goalkeeper is set to make the switch to Rangers after completing a medical. Kelly, who had been on international duty with Scotland, had signed a short-term deal at Motherwell to stretch beyond the tournament. The reason for the deal was to ensure Motherwell received a financial boost as a result of the goalkeeper representing his country. However, Kelly is expected to finalise a switch to Rangers to become Philip Comalt's 5th new arrival of the summer. Once the transfer has been completed, Rangers will have Jack Butland, Kelly and Robbie McCrory in the books in the goalkeeping department, after John McLaughlin left in the summer. It's expected Kelly will provide backup to Butland during the new season, with McCrory set to depart the club in a bid to land first-team football elsewhere. As reported by the Rangers Review, Ibrox Chiefs will demand a fee in the region of £500,000 for the goalkeeper to be allowed to leave in a transfer deal. There is active interest in McCrory from Premiership clubs as well as clubs in England. Rangers also have youth academy prospect Mason Munn signed for the next season, with the 18-year-old pinning a deal until 2028 earlier this week. Clement has already bolstered his squad this summer with the arrivals of Jefte, Oscar Cortez, Connor Barron and Clinton Nisayala. Hamza Igamani is also expected to complete a switch to Rangers in the near future. And that report was by David Irvin. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 1st of June, from the news section. Interview. NHS Borders ICU leader named Scotland Nurse of the Year. Article by health correspondent Helen McArdle. Good leadership in the NHS depends on creating a culture where everybody's voice counts, Scotland's Nurse of the Year has said. Speaking to the Herald following her win at the Royal College of Nursing Awards, Lindsay Russell, the Senior Charge Nurse, SCN, for intensive care at Borders General Hospital, said she was absolutely dumbfounded by the accolade. As well as scooping the top award, Mrs. Russell, who was nominated by her colleagues, also won in the category for clinical leadership. She said, "I've worked with a lot of them for a long time. They call me the gaffer, and I like that. I don't have a lot of hierarchy in the unit, and I think that's good because I've been in their shoes. I've done that job, I know how hard that is. For me, it was important to create a culture where absolutely everyone's voice counts. I think that's what makes good teamwork. And I always make sure I do a clinical day every week. That's really important to me because, to be a leader, you should never be too big to do the small things. One of my favourite jobs is still giving a man a wet shave." Mrs. Russell, 47, from Tweedbank, was inspired to pursue a career in nursing after her grandfather was admitted to hospital when she was a teenager. She had previously hoped to train as a PE teacher, admitting that she only stayed on till 6th year at school to play hockey, but was forced to reconsider when her grades fell short. She found that she loved learning about the human body and, after qualifying with a diploma in nursing and beginning her career as a theatre nurse at Borders General in 1997, she decided to further her studies with a degree in nursing. One of the modules was in critical care, leading to a 3-month secondment to intensive care. "I never went back because I loved it so much, said Mrs. Russell. Intensive care was joined onto theatre, so I used to come through quite a lot in the night shift and mooch about to see what was going on. I loved the buzz about it, the high acuity, the fast pace. I loved looking after sick patients and seeing the difference that you make in their lives. Sometimes we get a lot of tragedy, but a good percentage of our patients do recover and do well, and seeing them on that journey from being really sick to when they come back and visit us, it's so rewarding. We had a patient last year who was with us for 10 months, so you become quite attached. You become their family for that time. Mrs. Russell, who is married with 2 stepchildren and a 14-year-old daughter, put her passion for learning into practice when she was appointed senior charge nurse in August 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic. At the time, intensive care units across the UK were rapidly expanding their staffing, with doctors and nurses redeployed from other wards in the hospital who were suddenly grappling with an unfamiliar clinical environment under high-pressure conditions. In her own unit, Mrs. Russell developed a critical care cheat sheet which became a surprise social media phenomenon. She said, "We had new staff, redeployed staff, and it was really about trying to make things easier for them. People were scared and working in an environment unfamiliar to them, so we asked them, what would be beneficial to you? They were using ventilators and pumps and drugs that they had never used before, so they just wanted to know things like what would be normal values for patient results. We developed a cheat sheet and put it on the wall, and I put it on Twitter and it just went viral. Suddenly, critical care units were using it all over the country." More recently, Mrs. Russell has successfully lobbied for the appointment of a dedicated nurse educator within ITU to train up the team's skills and professional development, while also spearheading a shift in intensive care from a medical-led to nurse-led protocol. She said, "The project was all about sedation. It's been shown that the patients are more awake when they're on a ventilator. They can be more involved in their care, and it actually reduces mortality and length of hospital stay. We've put all of our staff in critical care course, and seeing them grow in confidence, that's what I love. In a district general, we don't have doctors on site all the time, so it's given them a real boost, and actually, the patients prefer the nurse-led approach." The model has now been shared with 3 other intensive care units in Scotland, and in October, Mrs. Russell will present the findings at the British Association of Critical Care Nurses conference in Aberdeen. She added, "There's a lot of doom and gloom about nursing, but I think we have to rewrite the narrative and say, actually, nursing is a profession and there are so many opportunities. We have to get across the positives and attract the junior nurses in. If you give them the proper education and the tools and the staffing ratios to do their job, that's what makes them flourish." And that report was by health correspondent Helen McArdle. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 30th of June, from the news section. Scooter rider in critical condition after serious car crash in Glasgow. This article was written by Josh Carmichael. A woman has been left in critical condition after colliding with a car in Glasgow this week. Police are appealing for information after the serious crash in the Baillieston area of the city, which involved a 58-year-old woman and a 77-year-old man. The woman was travelling in a mobility scooter on Main Street in Baillieston, between Church Street and Edinburgh Road, when she was involved in a crash with a car. As emergency services arrived at the scene at around 2 p.m. on Friday 28th of June, the woman was taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital for treatment. Her condition has been described as critical by emergency crews. The 77-year-old male driver of the car, a white Ford Fiesta, was also taken to the same hospital for treatment. He has only been treated for minor injuries. Following the crash, road policing officers closed the street for 5 hours before reopening it late on Friday evening. They say inquiries to establish the full circumstances of the incident are still ongoing. Sergeant Chris Hogan said, "I would ask anyone who may have witnessed the crash or who may have dashcam footage and has not yet spoken to or provided this information to officers to contact us as soon as possible. Anyone with information is urged to contact Police Scotland on 101, quoting reference 1895, of 28 June 2024. And the article was written by Josh Carmichael. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 30th of June, from the Voices section, exclusive: What Sweden Can Teach Scotland About Recycling Our Waste, by David Leask, journalist. It is the country that gave the world Greta Thunberg, crows chained to collect cigarette butts, and a wonderful word, ploggers, for folk who stop to pick up litter on their daily runs. Sweden, for many Scots, has an image of pristine nature, environmentally conscious citizens, and responsible social democratic government. The cliché, as clichés often do, has some truth to it. Thunberg, still only 21, has influence well beyond her years and her nation's borders as she fights against inaction on the climate emergency. A town council really did teach birds to hunt down cigarette waste, and some joggers in Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmo actually do stoop to scoop up street trash. But Sweden's left is out of office, replaced in 2022 by a centre-right alliance with an uncomfortable and controversial supply and confidence agreement with hard-right populists have only just U-turned to support net zero efforts. And the country still has its litter, not least plastic packaging and bottles in its rivers, harbours and canals. We did national monitoring 2 years ago now, and in that 1 week we found 35 million pieces of litter. Joanna Ragnarts, chief executive of Hal Sverige Rent, or Keep Sweden Tidy, told the Herald on Sunday. So I guess we are as dirty as any Western European country that has a decent system. We are no better, no worse. I think we have a pretty good system to take care of rubbish, but I don't think our behaviour is better than anyone else's. Sweden faces exactly the same culture of mass consumption as the rest of Europe and the developed world. Rich Swedes generate a lot of trash. The use of plastic packaging, Ragnar's has been booming since middle of the 80s. I'm not seeing any predictions of that stopping, she added. On the contrary, even plastic packaging, so much in the focus, is just continuing to grow, unfortunately for our sake. So what does Sweden do with all the rubbish it creates? Very little. Perhaps 1% ends up in landfill. More is burned to fuel the energy from waste plants. Sweden even imports Norwegian rubbish to keep warm. And lots, far more than in Scotland, is recycled and reused. Aside from plogging and crows that collect cigarette butts, Sweden has developed sexy litter bins that flirt with people who use them. Ooh yeah, right there, a recorded voice says when you insert rubbish through a slot in Malmo. When she mentions that good system, Ragnars is not talking about fun and stories about these sometimes gimmicky Swedish policies that make headlines overseas. No, Ragnars is explaining a variety of more important, if mundane policies, often known by their abbreviations, that have shifted the cost of handling trash from the public purse. So, the very long established DRS, or Deposit Return Scheme, and Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. The latter, in place in Sweden for decades, is when manufacturers cover the cost of collecting and recycling their products or their packaging. Crudely, this is a tax that polluters pay. It is designed to incentivise corporates to generate less waste. The UK is following suit, albeit with delays. Tories at Westminster, before they called their election, aimed to have an EPR scheme for packaging up and running by next year. As things stand, this British system would not raise any revenue for street sweeping, litter picking or anti-littering campaigns. Campaigners, including Keep Scotland Beautiful, want to change that. Devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are toying with the idea. Sweden has already adopted it. It's really difficult to compare litter between countries, said Ragnarts. I mean, it's dependent on cleaning up, on how much you invest in cleaning up. Right now, councils get money from manufacturers to collect and recycle rubbish. EPR has been in place since the 90s. The purpose is to make producers responsible for the product or the packaging all through the life cycle. Until recently, this funding stream was focused on what happens to rubbish generated at home, on paying for what Swedish householders throw in their bins. This has been working well, said Ragnars. Recycling rates run between 60 and 90% for various kinds of materials. What is new is an EPR for litter. In other words, producers are expected to help pay for the packaging people put in their bins and the packaging they dump in the street. Firms have to pay 2 litter levies. The first is a small fee to help administer the scheme. The second depends on how much of their packaging is found in litter streams, and that depends on accurate surveys from local authorities. How has this gone down with business? Of course, there's always some opposition to new regulations, mainly from the small producers, said Ragnars. But we have had a big debate on the litter problem, and this has been a big help to overcome opposition, because no one wants to have this situation. Bigger firms, especially big brands, often seem to be keener to be seen to be greener. Global fizzy drinks brands do not have much to gain from their plastic bottles bubbling down streams into the sea. Marketing chiefs at big burger chains are not chuffed by social or mainstream media pictures of their packaging shoved in hedges. Various other countries are exploiting litter EPR schemes, sometimes to tackle specific plastic problems such as cigarette butts or fishing nets. Multinationals are used to dealing with environmental regulations across Europe and tend not to get fazed by the demands of individual governments. After all, policies like EPR for litter at least partly stem from another abbreviation, SUPD, the European Union's Single-Use Plastic Directive of 2019. Various other countries are exploring litter EPR schemes, sometimes to tackle specific plastic problems such as cigarette butts or fishing nets. So, big firms are dealing with a broad strategic framework on handling plastic waste that covers almost the entire continent. Smaller firms, especially those who only work in one nation, can get antsier about regulation, about what they will see as a tax, rather than the state recouping the cost of cleaning up their mess. This is what happened in Scotland with DRS. Ancient history in Sweden, jokes Ragnars, when small manufacturers in particular objected to the scheme. Will EPR for litter play out the same way? Ragnars has some particular advice for Scotland. The EPR scheme is brilliant and of course you should implement it, she said. It is going in the right way, but do not rely on regulation. You always need to work in public education and campaigning. And that article was an exclusive by David Lease. From the Herald Scotland, Sunday the 30th of June, from the news section, exclusive, why the Scottish morning roll matters to our national pride. This article is an exclusive by Sarah Campbell, food and drink writer. There is an oft-quoted piece of wisdom from Sir Billy Connolly on the subject of the humble morning roll and what it means to his home city. Go to Glasgow at least once in your life, he says, and have a roll and square sliced sausage and a cup of tea. When you feel the tea coursing over your spice-singed tongue, you'll know what I mean when I say, it's good to be alive. Those of us who have had the pleasure of doing so, hopefully more than once, know exactly what the big yin is getting at. They're not flash, and far from adventurous, but there's comfort in the knowledge that any cafe worth its salt across Scotland will serve its own menu of filled morning rolls, whether it's Morton's or McGee's, well-fired or crispy, tomato or brown sauce. Delving further into this with a Food Writers Guild award-winning essay is Peter Gilchrist of Tenement Kitchen. In Make Mine a Doubler, penned just days after news broke that Morton's Rolls was to cease trading in March 2023, he wrote, "Frankly, we were surprised by our own reactions. People took to social media to talk about their Morton's memories. Conversations about the perfect fillings broke out at bus stops. Like many people in the west of Scotland, I am flooded with nostalgia when I eat my right kind of morning roll. Whether Morton's is to be saved, or we have had the last of the tangy, hard-shell rolls, we have identified, as a people, that we care for this food and that it has value to us. There was, of course, a happy ending to this tale as a consortium took over Morton's just weeks later and saved it from collapse. Speaking to the Herald this week, Gilchrist remembers the impact this near closure had on the communities across Scotland and argues that building on the connections between the food we eat and shared cultural heritage is the key to reframing attitudes towards the staples of our diets. When I wrote the essay, I just started to become really passionate about food heritage, history, and the idea that traditionally working class Scottish food is something to shout about. They were right when I wanted them to be, thinking about family memories, their own food history, and sharing opinions on what they think the right way to enjoy a roll is. There was this new appreciation for how important Morton's rolls are. Having grown up in Paisley in the 1990s, Gilchrist fondly looks back on weekends when his father would nip out first thing to pick up a fresh dozen rolls and fillings from the local butchers to kick off the day. His love for the simple pleasure remains steadfast and adds fuel to the belief that it should be held in the same high regard as artisan delicacies from around the globe. He said, "If you think France, no one would ever say that their baguettes or morning pastries are not worth celebrating. Because we've grown up with them, we don't often consider the quality of our morning rolls and the fact that you could visit Scotland and spend weeks exploring all of our cities and towns, finding out the different ways they're baked or filled. Each one is identifiable by its community, the result of 100 years' worth of bakers passing down techniques to develop their own recipes. No one would come to Scotland and say our morning rolls aren't special." Part of the issue, Gilchrist suggests, is a warped view of the Scottish food which has developed over the years, resulting in a lack of connection to the dishes that make the country great. A lot of the time when Scottish food is presented to the world, it's on a tartan tablecloth or next to a BMI chart, he said. Or it'll be something like a whole boiled haggis or lobster, which most of us rarely come into contact with. As a culture, we've lost a lot of pride in the food that we eat and allowed ourselves to become a bit of a caricature. When people talk about their affinity for deep fried foods, what they're actually talking about without realising is generations of poverty and people trying to survive by frying foods that were cheap and accessible. Our obsession with potatoes, bread and rolls, which were all things that helped to keep people alive. It's easy to forget just how poor a lot of the west coast of Scotland has been over the years. When a joke is made of that, it's an unconscious way of telling you that what you eat is below par or not enjoyable, which makes it difficult to find pride as a nation. The inspiration for Gilchrist's work comes from researching his own family recipes and finding that words written in his grandmother's script allowed him to initiate conversations that otherwise might never have taken place. When my dad's mother passed away, speaking about the food they ate as children soon turned into discussions about his dad, who was a pacifist, learning to grow tomatoes in a prisoner of war camp. He later had a nervous breakdown and struggled to find permanent work, which meant that the family struggled with money. This is the kind of conversation that would otherwise be difficult to have had if it had not been for opening chat about tomatoes. So how do we rip up the tartan tablecloth and reclaim our pride for recipes that have graced tables across Scotland throughout the decades? Asking each other things like, how did your mum make her mince and tatties, or what did you take in your morning roll, allow us to start to open up to each other. Finding ways to talk about the excellence of our family recipes and the food we grew up eating means it will be reflected back to us through others. That's something that can be very powerful, especially if we can get someone like Visit Scotland or Scotland Food and Drink involved. Visitors come here for the Outlander experience, and of course, many people in Scotland do eat smoked salmon or Aberdeen and Angus beef and drink expensive whisky. But if that's all we talk about, then there's so much being missed out. There's a real opportunity for us here to invest in showcasing real Scottish food and culture as part of our visitor experience. Peter Gilchrist is a Scotland Food and Drink Ambassador, as well as Chief Executive and Project Manager of Tenement Kitchen, specialising in Scottish recipe development and food history research. And that article was an exclusive by Sarah Campbell. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 1st of July, from the news section, Woman charged after unexplained death of worker at Asda store. Report by Craig Williams. A woman has been charged after the unexplained death of a worker at an Asda store in Arbroath. Police were called to a report of an unresponsive man within the supermarket in the town's Westway retail park. Emergency services attended and a 61-year-old man, who reportedly worked as a security guard at the store, was pronounced dead at the scene. Police say they are currently treating the death as unexplained. A 37-year-old woman has been arrested and charged in connection with an assault, police added. She is due to appear at Forfar Sheriff Court on Tuesday. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, around 7:25pm on Sunday, 30th of June 2024, we were called to a report of an unresponsive man within a supermarket at Westway Retail Park, Arbroath. Emergency services attended and a 61-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. The death has been treated as unexplained at this time and a post-mortem examination will be carried out in due course. A 37-year-old woman has been arrested and charged in connection with an assault. She is due to appear at Forfar Sheriff Court on Tuesday, the 2nd of July. An article was written by Craig Williams. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 1st of July. From the business section, Brexit ideology may blinker Sunak. What is Starmer's excuse? By Group Business Editor Ian McConnell. We have had another week of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer slugging it out on the economy. It is perhaps remarkable there is such friction between them in this front, given there are some significant pieces of common ground between Labour and the Conservatives on key issues with a huge bearing on the economy. The most obvious one is, of course, the embracing by both of the hard Brexit. That also in the real world means, of course, a bizarre contentment to see the damage being done to the UK economy by Brexit continue unabated. Sir Keir and Mr Sunak claim to be interested in growth. However, they are entirely opposed to one thing that will give the UK a great fillip: rejoining the European single market. Of course, it remains to be seen how the European Union would react to an approach from the UK about rejoining. People have noted the EU has priorities other than the UK's desires, and you can see why the EU would be uninterested in Labour's proposals to tinker around the edges of the trade and cooperation agreement. In contrast, you would imagine that there might well be more interest from the EU if a future UK government were to hold up its hands, acknowledge the dire Brexit mistake of the Tories and seek a path back to the single market. Rejoining the EU might be politically challenging, though it would surely be possible if the will were there. However, it is difficult to see huge practical hurdles to the UK simply rejoining the single market, especially if this were done before the UK got too far away from regularity alignment with the EU. Of course, those hardliners who gave us Brexit are most enthusiastic about destroying such alignment, and it almost seems in some instances that they want to make sure bridges are burned. For now, of course, we are not going to find out what would transpire if the UK sought a way back into the single market. Sir Keir is as enthusiastic about the hard Brexit as the Tories. He has ruled out the UK rejoining the EU, the single market, or even the customs union. His deputy, Angela Rayner, has said Labour will never take the UK back into the single market or customs union. While the Tories and Labour have been at pains to avoid addressing the realities of Brexit, the SNP has been keen to discuss them. Scottish First Minister John Swinney claimed in a speech last week at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen that there was a dangerous conspiracy of silence between Labour and the Conservatives on Brexit. Mr Swinney declared, "They do not want to talk about it. It is the elephant in the room at this election, and that's important." He added, "Given the damage that Brexit has caused, it is absolutely astonishing that none of the Westminster parties are interested in repairing that damage. They say they prioritise economic growth, but you can't be a party of Brexit and a party of growth." The point about being unable to be a party of both Brexit and growth seems like a simple arithmetical truth. For his part, Mr Sunak continues to try to portray the Conservatives as best for the economy. It is a fascinating assertion given the economic reality. For years, the Brexiteers got by with bluster on all issues related to their cause, and at times looked to have much of the electorate believing what they were doing was in some way good for the UK economy. That myth is now swiftly being dispelled. Anand Menon, director of the UK in a Changing Europe, offers an astute analysis of where we are at with Brexit, from the perspectives of the politicians, the electorate, and, crucially, the economy that Think Tank's manifesto analysis published on June 21st. Mr. Menon says in this report, 5 years is a long time in politics. The 2019 election was all about Brexit. Now, Brexit is the dog the large parties have effectively muzzled. He adds, Brexit might be done, but it's not over. There is scope for future tensions over the protocol and the unique position of Northern Ireland. Upcoming negotiations over energy and fish, plus a scheduled review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, hold out the prospect of further collaboration or renewed conflict. Meanwhile, public opinion has shifted quite dramatically, with poll after poll underlining decreased support for Brexit. Finally, there is the elephant in the room. Brexit continues to impose costs on the British economy, and future governments will confront difficult choices as to how far they are willing to go to mitigate these. One big problem as things stand is that Labour, as well as the Conservative government, is not talking about these costs. It is impossible to conceive Labour and the Conservatives do not see this enormous damage. The similarities of their Brexit stances are plain. Reflecting on what the Conservative and Labour manifestos say, UK ICE senior fellow Jonathan Ports writes, neither will reverse Brexit or rejoin the single market or customs union, and both are committed to new trade deals with countries beyond the EU, including India. But Labour will try to negotiate various deals with the EU to make Brexit work. Mr. Sunak has, of course, been a Brexiteer all along, so might be blinkered by ideology. Sir Keir, however, argued vociferously against Brexit back in 2019, so he must see the damage in its entirety, surely? And that was a business article by Group Business Editor Ian McConnell.
The Herald on 2nd of July and the news section. Downing Street dismisses missing postal vote disenfranchisement by Andrew Learmonth. Downing Street has moved to play down fears over missing postal ballots, saying they disagreed with John Spinney's claim that voters were being disenfranchised. However, one leading Scottish Conservative candidate said he feared the growing crisis could stop him from winning on Thursday. It is not known how many people have been affected, but most those reporting difficulties applied for a postal vote after June 7, but ahead of the June 19 deadline. While it is a problem across the UK, it is being keenly felt north of the border, where most schools are now closed for the summer, and many families are heading off on holiday. Hundreds of voters across the country have now appealed to councils for emergency replacement postal votes ahead of the election. Aberdeen told the Herald they had issued 148 replacement postal votes by Monday morning, while Glasgow has issued 170 by Friday night. East Lothian sent out 44 replacements, while Midlothian issued 27. Although these are relatively small numbers, they could make all the difference in close contests. Last week, a Survation poll for the Herald and Ballot Box Scotland suggested around 15 of Scotland's 57 constituencies were on a knife edge, where the result could go either way with a swing of 2% or less. The First Minister has previously said he is worried people will be disenfranchised. On Monday, when asked if the Prime Minister shared Mr. Swinney's concerns, Mr. Sunak's official spokesman told reporters, no. We are aware of some concerns around the printing and delivery of postal ballot packs in some local areas. We're working closely with the Electoral Commission, returning officers, Royal Mail and the print suppliers to support the resolution of these issues. We understand that the Royal Mail will also be conducting sweeps of their delivery system on polling day to make sure that any ballot packs still in the postal system are identified and passed to returning officers ahead of polls closing. And anyone who hasn't received their postal ballot yet may want to contact their returning officer or arrange for it to be reissued, or to arrange for an alternative avenue to cast their ballot. Speaking to the Telegraph, Luke Graham, the Tory candidate in Perth and Kinrossshire, said more than 20 voters had told him they had not received their papers before going on holiday. In 2017, the SNP won the seat by 21. Mr. Graham said it absolutely could be the difference between winning or losing. It impacts all parties, but I've had at least 20 people contacting me to say they have not had their ballot paper before going away on holiday. It's incredibly frustrating. Nobody should be disenfranchised like this, he said. I don't know whether it's the Royal Mail or the printing company, but there needs to be an investigation and action taken. I want every vote to come through Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawar, as also voiced concerns. He said, I'm deeply concerned across the board because one person disenfranchises one person too many, regardless of their politics, regardless of who they vote for, because that's the fundamentals of our democracy. And I'm aware of several cases already of people who have left to go on holiday and didn't receive their postal votes on time. That is not acceptable. He also said councils should take a consistent approach to setting up the emergency postal vote stations and avoid any confusion. At the weekend, Mr. Swinney said there appeared to have been little consideration given to the issue of Scotland's summer school holidays and the timing of the election. Speaking to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips on Sky News, Mr. Swinney said, unfortunately, there is nothing that can be done. They have to be here to be able to exercise their postal vote. If it's been delivered to the House or if there's an alternative arrangement in place. There are no other proxy arrangements that can be put in place, but I think it's illustrative of the fact that there was no thought given to summer school holidays. Scottish Tory chairman Craig Hoy rejected that. He told the Herald the election was called 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago nearly. Plenty notice was given. There's no issue about holding an election during a holiday period. It's happened in the past. Obviously, we might want to look at this afterwards, but I don't think we should be attributing blame to one set of politicians or to one component part of this process. A spokesperson for the Electoral Commission said tens of thousands of postal votes were delivered over the weekend. We know local authorities and Royal Mail are working to get the final ones out as soon as possible. As is the case at all elections, given the electoral timetable, there's a short window of time for administrators to prepare and dispatch postal votes. Anyone who hasn't yet received their postal ballot pack should request a replacement from their local authority. Voters have the option to hand their postal pack to their polling station on polling day if they are concerned about posting it. They can also ask someone to hand their ballot pack in on their behalf. Voters can hand up to a maximum of 5 postal ballots in addition to their own and will be required to complete a form at the polling station when doing so. We recognise the pressures on the postal voting system due to the holiday season. We are continuing to provide advice and guidance to electoral services teams to support them with the postal voting process. Following the election, we will undertake research with voters and electoral administrators to understand their experiences at this poll. The administration of postal voting is one of the areas we will look at. And that was by Andrew Learmonth. The Herald on the 2nd of July and the news section. Isla Airport turns runway into nesting ground for rare birds by Jodie Harrison. Most airports try and keep their runways clear of birds, but One Island Air Terminal is flipping the script to give small fledglings a chance and boost a declining population of rare birds. Conservationists on Isla have turned a disused runway near the shore into a breeding ground for little terns, which migrate to the Scotland and its islands to nest on the ground in colonies. Stopping support for fixed wings or for the feathered variety, staff at the airport and a team from the conservation programme Species on the Edge worked to create a safe haven at the airport by transforming the runway into a beach for the birds to nest on. They have even prepared the ground with plastic decoy terns in the hopes of encouraging the real-life variety to pick the spot to nest and raise chicks. The hope is that by the end of the breeding season, no stone will be unturned and a new population of the diminutive birds will take flight. Neil Coulthart, Isla's airport manager, said, I'm delighted by our collaboration with Species on the Edge and RSPB to create a safe nesting habitat for the little terns on this beautiful island. This initiative not only helps protect a vulnerable species, but also underscores our commitment to environmental stewardship. By repurposing a disused section of our runway, we're ensuring that these remarkable birds have a secure place to breed and thrive, contributing to the conservation of Isla's natural heritage. The latest breeding seabird census shows that little tern numbers have fallen by almost a third in the last 2 decades, with the Argyll and Bute region seeing its population fall by a half. Creating disturbance-free areas with suitable nesting material is one of the most important actions that can be taken to help protect little terns, with colony sites often prone to disturbance by humans, dogs and flooding. Seabirds can abandon nests, eggs and chicks if they feel threatened. Lucy Atkinson, Species on the Edge project officer in Isla, said, "We will be monitoring the area over the breeding season and are excited to see the positive impact of our ground nesting birds. The little tern is one of 37 rare and vulnerable species being supported through the Species on the Edge programme. The multi-million-pound scheme, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, is active across 7 areas in Scotland, working with local groups and communities to secure a future for Scotland's most at-risk coastal species." Fiona Strachan, Species on the Edge event programme manager, added, "It's great to see this collaborative effort to support little terns on Isla. The terns need our help now more than ever, and this is an excellent example of the kind of partnership we are encouraging across our project areas. We're very grateful to all involved and are keeping our fingers crossed for a successful breeding season for the terns." Gail Barclay, Head of Environment and Sustainability with Highlands and Islands Airport, said, "As caretakers of our environment, we at Highland and Islands Airports Limited are proud to collaborate with Species on the Edge and RSPB in creating a sanctuary for little terns at Isla Airport." And that was by Jodie Harrison. The Herald on the 2nd of July and the news section. Delight as first ever quadruplet babies born in NHS Lothian by Helen McCardle. A couple are checking after beating massive odds of 1 in 700,000 to give birth to 4 beautiful baby boys. Arlene and John Mitchell from Longridge in West Lothian have welcomed a rare set of quadruplets into the world, making them the first naturally conceived quads ever born in Lothian. The tiny new arrivals, Ben, Noah, Harrison and Rory, were born on May 14 and tipped the scales at less than £3 each. The smallest of the baby brothers, Harrison, weighed in at £2 14 ounces, while Ben, Noah and Rory each weighs £2 15 ounces. Naturally conceived quadruplets are extremely rare, with doctors estimating the odds at about 1 in 700,000 births. Arlene said, "It was a total shock when we found out there were 4 babies at the first scan. The nurse said that she thought there was more than 1 baby, and then she said there was more than 3 babies. I was absolutely speechless, and my husband just couldn't believe it. They are really beautiful, and we're so delighted. We can't wait to take our 4 boys home to Lauren and Hunter and start our journey as a family of 8. John said, "Life is going to be a bit noisier for all of us, but I'm really looking forward to us being one big family." Arlene was closely monitored throughout her pregnancy because of risks associated with multiple births, such as premature delivery and preeclampsia. Arlene added, "Having quadruplets is a high-risk pregnancy, and at every scan I was really anxious that there wouldn't be four heartbeats. The midwifery team were absolutely amazing. They really supported me every step of the way. A dedicated team of 17 doctors and midwives delivered the quadruplets in the Symptoms Centre for Reproductive Health at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh on May 14. Arlene, who's just 5'2", underwent a planned caesarean section when she was 30 weeks pregnant to reduce the risks. Each baby had an individual team of 4 clinicians assigned to them to look after them as soon as they were welcomed into the world. At first, the boys were each given intensive care in the neonatal department to help stabilise their breathing and allow them to grow while they were tube-fed. 2 of the boys, Harrison and Rory, were then moved to the special care baby unit in St John's Hospital to be closer to their family before Ben and Noah joined them. Katie Ruggery, Associate Director of Midwifery NHS Lothian, said, "Delivering quadruplets is an extraordinary experience, and I'm immensely proud of our entire midwifery and neonatal team for their dedication and expertise throughout this remarkable journey. This was the first set of quadruplets delivered in Lothian, and it's something the entire team will remember for the rest of their careers. The boys are now thriving, and Arlene and John are preparing for the big move home." Arlene said, "Welcoming quadruplets into the world has been an incredible and overwhelming experience. It's going to be a very different house and probably a bit noisier, but we're so looking forward to taking our babies home." And that was by Helen McArdle. The Herald on the 2nd of July in the Arts and Ents section. Travis fan Fran Healy on Chris Martin, Brandon Flowers and his new hair by Paul English. When Fran Healy hit a wall writing songs for the new Travis album, he decided to bring things full circle. Chris has made a few good records in his time, so I sent him a text and asked him if he wanted to go for a drive up to the Pacific Coast Highway, says the Ivor Novello-winning songwriter, recalling the intervention made by the frontman of the biggest band in the world. So I drove up to his house and he jumped in the car and we went for a drive up to the coast. He listened to the record with me in the car as we drove, because I was at the point that I was becoming blind to it. An hour later, Healy was finishing off a new song with his pal at the piano in Chris Martin's Los Angeles home, bringing the connection between an all-conquering stadium rockers Coldplay and the band who inspired them to a creative fulcrum 3 decades later. Chris Martin has spoken in the past about how Glasgow Brit winners Travis were the band who invented My Band and many others, with their 1997 debut album Good Feeling and its hugely influential 1999 follow-up smash The Man Who. He's a sweet, sweet man, Chris. He was like, "Turn it down, man, it can be too loud." He's protective of his ears. He's very Yoda about his stuff, a purist. The result of their coastal collaboration can be heard on Raise the Bar, the second single from Travis's forthcoming new album LA Times, released this summer. Martin provides backing vocals on the track alongside Brandon Flowers of The Killers, another stadium-filling frontman who started out busking Travis's tunes at open mic sessions in the early 2000s. Healy said, "We got back to Chris's house after this drive up and down the PCH. He went straight to the piano and started singing Raise the Bar. It was already there in his head. A few days later, I asked him if he wanted to sing on the chorus, and he was up for it right away. He was talking about Donna Summer getting a bunch of uncredited mates in to sing on a song and said I should do the same. Brandon was really my only other big celebrity bandmate, so I texted him and he was like, 'Sure, man.' The circularity of it all isn't lost on Chris either. I'd actually seen him a few weeks earlier. I was dropping off my son Clay at a school concert Chris's boy was playing at, rolled down my window and shouted, 'Ho you,' in the most Glaswegian accent ever. I actually told him that day how I thought he was a force for good and how he'd make a lot of people happy, because he does, and I don't know if anyone ever tells him. What's more could you want from life than that?" He was slightly misty-eyed. The new album's the band's first since their brilliant 10 songs, released at the height of COVID and stunted by the lack of live touring. Written in Fran's studio on Skid Row and recorded on LA with Beck and Phoenix producer Tony Hoffer, the band's 10th record is a classic Travis cut, laced with memorable jaunty hooks, new single Bus, and gentle melodic introspection, the falsetto of Live It All Again. Healy turning his pen to everything from a lament to his favourite boozer in New York, Raise the Bar, and blight of social media influence, I hope that you spontaneously combust, to a toxic relationship, Gaslight, and a song that he started writing in 1997 and finished 27 years later, Naked in New York. "We didn't get the last record out of the gates properly," said Healy. "It's a good record, but it's overlooked. trapdoors didn't get opened. We didn't get to tour because of COVID. It was very frustrating, but that's the way it is. So this record is really important to us. We feel like we have a lot to prove. We need to make an even better record than the last one. Also, if you've been around as long as we have, since 1997, people can be forgiven for writing you off. I wouldn't blame you for writing off a band that has been around that long. But we really are a good band, and if a good band hasn't thrown in the towel, then you should never write them off. I feel very ready, and I've checked the gates. They're working. Healy and bandmates Dougie Payne, Andy Dunlop and Neil Primrose have road tested the songs on tour with the Killers, including 3 nights at the Hydro in Glasgow last week. It's been brilliant to be on the road with them. Before the tour, I sent Brandon a message saying, "You know we're going to blow you off the stage every night," and he replied, "I'm perfectly aware of that," says Healy, laughing. The Killers go like a rocket. We're like a submarine. We go underwater and we'll do things down there that you're not sure of. The band will return to the Hydro on December 21, supported by Hamish Hawke, as part of a world tour in support of the new record, and in celebration of hits like Driftwood, Flowers in the Window, and Selfish Gene that have sustained the 3 decades of popularity. Voices from other bands aren't the only thing Travis have borrowed for their new album. The frontman has been Annie Lennox's early Eurythmics hair dye, too. It's a light for attracting attention onto this record, said Healy, smiling. And I've never had more attention in my life. It's the hair equivalent of driving a VW camper van. I was walking around Dublin the other day after opening for the Killers and had people shouting off the open bus tour who had been at the gig. I was in a bar in New York with my new other half, and a woman in her 80s came up to me, left a postcard on the table from the friend she'd been with, and on which she'd written, "Your hair is beautiful," with all those smiley faces. I'd been worrying it was too much. This is an important record for the band, so I want to look the part. And the band can find me in a crowded airport very easily, which is a bonus. And that was by Paul English.
This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday, the 2nd of July 2024, from the business section. Famous Aberfeldy whisky maker launches tourist attraction. This article is by Brian Donnelly. A famous Scottish distillery has hailed a new tourism facility at its historic site. Dewar's Aberfeldy Distillery has opened a new experience inviting visitors to delve into the flavour of the world's most awarded blended Scotch whisky. The firm said visitors are invited to embark on a journey of discovery into the world of whisky making, exploring the renowned double aging process of Dewar's blended Scotch and the history of Aberfeldy single malt Scotch whisky. The new experience is located in the original 1898 warehouse buildings at this historic Charles Doig designed distillery in the heart of the Perthshire Highlands. The addition to the distillery represents a significant investment to elevate its visitor experience by taking guests on a new warehouse experience tour. After a tour of the on-site archive museum and production stages, the warehouse experience begins in the old filling store with the Aberfeldy single malt casking and maturation story. From there, guests enter the blender's bothy to understand the 4-stage aging process of the Dewar's double range. Here, guests are able to meet an avatar of 6-time International Whisky Competition Master Blender of the Year, Stephanie McLeod, using the latest projection technology. Stephanie McLeod, Dewar Master Blender and Malt Master, said, "Dewar's Aberfeldy Distillery stands as a testament to the Dewar family's rich legacy in whisky making. Its location, blessed by the pure waters of the Petillie Burn, not only provides a pristine water source for our Aberfeldy distillery, but also connects us to the timeless traditions and craftsmanship of our forefathers. With guests now able to visit our iconic warehouses, built in 1898, they will now gain a deeper understanding of the final steps that our new make spirit takes to become the premium quality whiskies that go on to be enjoyed around the world. The town of Aberfeldy is described as the spiritual home of the Dewar's brand, with Dewar's Aberfeldy distillery being the only distillery built by the Dewar brothers and the site of production for Aberfeldy Highland Scotch malt whisky for over 125 years. That article was by Brian Donnelly. This is from the Herald Scotland of Tuesday the 2nd of July 2024 from the business section. The Macallan Scotch whisky is strong despite abrupt end to boom. This article is by Ian McConnell. Scotch whisky distiller Edrington, which produces the Macallan and Highland Park single malts, yesterday unveiled a 6% rise in underlying annual pre-tax profits to £411 million, as core revenues jumped 11% to £1.165 billion. Chief Executive Scott McCroskey voiced his belief that Edrington's results for the 12 months to March the 31st were among the best in the spirits industry. However, mulling the outlook, he highlighted his expectations that demand would be adversely affected by economic pressures seen in the second half of the financial year to March 2024. Mr. McCroskey declared the post-COVID spirits boom had come to an abrupt end during the year to March 31st. He revealed that Glasgow-based Edrington, which is controlled by the charitable Robertson Trust, was consequently planning for lower levels of growth than those seen since the end of the coronavirus pandemic. However, Mr. McCroskey also highlighted the distiller's continued heavy investment in its brands. Edrington declared that, in the year to March 31st, markets in Asia-Pacific showed strong growth, with China performing particularly well. It added that the Macallan Colour Collection had generated outstanding early results in the global travel retail segment. Edrington employs about 3,300 people, with slightly more than half of its workforce based outside the UK. The UK workforce is predominantly in Scotland. Mr. McCroskey said, Edrington has navigated a challenging year to deliver financial results that are among the best in the spirits industry. Our strategy of focusing on ultra-premium spirits continues to deliver healthy brands and a strong underlying performance. However, we consider that the economic pressures that we saw in the second half of last year will adversely affect demand. While we will continue to invest in our brands, in our operations, and in sustainability, the business is planning for the coming year on the basis of lower levels of growth than we have experienced since the end of the pandemic. Brand investment by Edrington during the year to March 31st was £262.1 million, up 16% on the prior 12 months. Core contribution, defined by Edrington as profits from its branded sales and distribution after the deduction of overheads on a constant currency basis, rose by 16% to £454.8 million. In his Chief Executive's review in the annual report, Mr. McCroskey writes, I am pleased to present another set of strong annual results for Edrington, which have been achieved despite the post-COVID spirits boom coming to an abrupt end during this reporting period. The year was one of two halves, an exceptionally strong first 6 months, followed by a much slower second half. The changing dynamic was driven primarily by weaker demand as consumer confidence and spending power declined in response to rising prices and interest rates in many countries, as well as uncertainty about the future caused by a range of issues, including conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East. The impact was exacerbated by trade destocking to meet the lower level of demand and to mitigate the higher cost of financing inventories. He adds, despite these challenges, Edrington achieved 11% growth in core revenue and a 16% increase in core contribution over the previous year. The higher rate of growth in core contribution reflects an increasing proportion of sales from higher value, more profitable products in line with our strategy. This year's results continue a trend of strong growth, with Edrington increasing its core contribution by 87% over 4 years from 2019 to 2020. Despite doubling our brand investment in the same period. This achievement reflects the success of our ultra-premium strategy and especially of the Macallan. Mr. McCroskey reports that the Macallan delivered robust growth in key markets across Asia-Pacific and particularly in Greater China. He writes, our EMEIA region, encompassing Europe, the Middle East, India and Africa, performed well, whilst markets in the Americas were most affected by weaker consumer demand. Flagging challenges for the Glenrothes and Highland Park in the year to March 31st, while expressing confidence in the prospects for these single malts, Mr. McCroskey says, our other ultra-premium single malts, the Glenrothes and Highland Park, have been affected by the drop in consumer demand last year, particularly as this has coincided with their repositioning programs and our strategic decision to discontinue lower value expressions. We are confident that the brand's new ultra-premium positioning will resonate with consumers in the coming years. Edrington noted it had, during the financial year, increased its investments in the supply chain that provides the highest quality sherry-seasoned oak casks for the Macallan through the acquisition of the Vazima cooperage business based in Jerez, Spain, and a 50% stake in its main supplier of American oak, Cooper's Oak of Ohio. The distiller observed that the Macallan has launched celebrations to mark its 200th anniversary, featuring a unique partnership with Cirque du Soleil. Edrington added that the brand will launch a range of new products, experiences and campaigns over the coming year. That article was by Ian McConnell.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, rate, review and tell your friends about our service.